We've been counting down the best games that I played in 2024, and tonight it's time to talk about the top 3.
Top 10 of the year.
Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and we have been counting down the top 10 games that I played in 2024. We finally made it to the top 3. In the last 2 weeks, we've talked about miniatures battling games with samurai. We've talked about dueling card games, cooperative games where you're landing planes, a super fun abstract game, even a trick-taking game. But tonight we're going to talk about the best games I played this year. Now, these are the best games that I played. They're new to me. One of the games came out before 2024. The other is brand new, and the third one just finished on Kickstarter not too long ago, so it's not even delivering until 2025, but I cannot wait to talk to you about these amazing games that I played this year. Let's get right down to business with number 3.
Number 3.
Let's start with the number 3 game. A fantastic game that actually came out in 2022, but there have been a more recent expansion that went up on Kickstarter. This is a game that's new to me. I backed the base game when the expansion was coming out because I just had to play this thing. A game that has been behind my back all year round. You can probably see it still on the shelf. I didn't want to take it down just because I wanted this announcement to be a surprise. We are talking about Foundations of Rome from Arcane Wonders. This is a game that has a Board Game Geek rating of 8.0. So a fantastic game. You can't call it a fantastic little game. This is a really large monstrosity of a game that I think weighs, when it came in, when they shipped it to me, I think it weighs around 20 pounds. Foundations of Rome is a bidding area control economic game where you're earning victory points by building up your population, but in order to buy properties, in order to place your buildings on, you have to own the property to place a building, and then you need money to be able to do that. So you're balancing out a few things here in a game that's still very straightforward and a lot of fun. The pieces for this game are absolutely gorgeous. These buildings are beautiful. So here's one of the larger ones, and they've done like a sunspot finish on these. These are pre-built. I didn't have to build anything other than clipping the colors, the colored tabs here so that everyone knows who owns which building to the top of each of these. You can see the buildings are gorgeous. Once they're all together on the map, they're gorgeous. I brought the neoprene mat with me to a board game event just so that I have a mat to play on, but I didn't bring the game, and my Italian friend was very put out that he couldn't play Foundations of Rome, even though I had the Foundations of Rome playmat with me. We're talking about a game where the player pieces are all the same, other than the colors. Everyone has the same buildings, but then you've got this monuments expansion that has buildings that are large and detailed. And absolutely, I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but these are fantastic buildings that you might get to. You have to meet some requirements before you can build one of these monuments, but they're going to give you a pretty big bonus. Here we have one with the ship in the harbor even. So some of these buildings are commercial. They're going to earn you money. Some are for population. They're residential buildings. And then you've got these civics buildings that are going to work to give you some other bonuses based on the buildings that are around them. Foundations of Rome is another one of those games where the rules are simple. You're buying deeds to properties on the map. You're placing your little counter to show that you own that space. You're trying to get groups of properties so that you can place larger and larger buildings, and that's how you're going to earn the points. There are a lot of different ways of playing the game, though. There's some modular rules where you can trade your properties, or there's lots of different things you can add, including the monuments expansion, so you can kind of ramp up the difficulty, customize the game however you want. This is one, it's got a Dice Tower Essentials logo on the label, and I would say this is an essential board game just because it's beautiful, strategic, but simple enough to learn and teach. And there is a lot of push and pull when you're trying to buy those properties. You want to make sure that you've got enough money. You want to snipe the properties that the other players want to buy. Just a fantastic game. And it's tight. It's strategic. The boards are different sizes depending on the number of players, so you're always crowded and fighting for space. There's a lot of competition there. You're not directly influencing your opponent's plans. The take that is if you buy the deed that they wanted. But and it is pretty obvious which spaces on the board you're going to be going for, so you do have to adjust your plan along the way. So Foundations of Rome is just a gorgeous game that's easy to learn and super fun to play. And that puts it in my top three, even though it's a slightly older game.
Number 2.
My number two game of the year is one that hasn't been released widely yet. I do not have the pieces here in front of me or the game box to show you why, because I had a prototype. I got to try a couple of prototypes of the game. I played many times once I had my hands on this one. This is a game called Lairs from Kids Table Board Games. Lairs is a game that does not yet have a Board Game Geek rating. Not enough people have played this one. I've seen folks who played demos. I think the average, with the few people who've played the very basic early prototype of the game, it's averaging out around 7.6. I think 9 is the highest, the greatest number of ratings. Raters are giving it a 9. But the prototypes that were sent around were just that. They were prototypes. They were great looking. You've got monster meeples, and there's multiple different kinds of monsters. You've got a couple of different dungeoneers who are going to be exploring the dungeon. Lairs is a dungeon building, dungeon crawling game. So the base game is one where two players are each going to make their own dungeon hidden behind a screen, and then you get to explore your opponent's dungeon, trying to avoid or disarm traps, trying to kill some monsters and grab some treasure so that you can escape the maze. The dungeon building portion of the game is super fun. It is just, you're kind of laughing at the traps and the way that you're laying things out in order to trick your opponent. At that part, my son played it with his friends even, and they were laughing as they were building their dungeons. I mean, even that part is a good time, just knowing what you're going to be putting your friend through as they're exploring your creation. And then you've got this clever energy resource management mechanism where you've got cubes that you're spending to move through the map, to take actions, to buy dice so that you can overcome and battle monsters. Now, I did have a couple of secret components that not everyone was allowed to see. This was really just to show the reviewers the plans that the designers had for this game. I wasn't allowed to talk about those things when I originally reviewed Lairs, but they've announced a lot of those as part of the Kickstarter campaign. First, even though the version I had was 2 players only, now that the Kickstarter campaign is done, you've got a situation where you can play more players. One person can design a dungeon and a party can explore that dungeon. So that by itself makes it even more, I think, interesting for me because it's a bit more flexible. And the monsters and traps are very clever too. You can also spend cubes to backtrack through parts of the maze that you've already been through. So it's a game where I just think that the resource management is very clever. It's modular in terms of the rules, and you can slowly amp things up with new abilities, new powers, with different monsters. They've added dungeons that are larger so that you can add more things to them and play a longer, more complicated game as well. I mean, it's a game that I could play over and over and over and over again, and it's strategic enough, but really you're just laughing the whole time you play this thing. It's just what a great time we had playing Lairs, and that's why it's in my top 3. Even though I don't have a copy physically to show you, I was so excited about all these new announcements that I could tell you about that came out from the Kickstarter. That I think this is a game that's going to be very much talked about when it finally releases in 2025, hopefully early in 2025. I can't wait to play this again. But what a great little game. Simple, strategic, fun, funny. asymmetric abilities. There's so much that I could talk about in terms of this game, but Lairs is my number 2 kids table board game. I think KTBG has created something really special.
Number 1.
And here it is. My number 1 game of 2024 is a 2024 game, a fairly recent release in 2024. The Kickstarter campaign was earlier in the year, and I think I received my copy maybe in November. This is a game that I can't stop thinking about or talking about, and my playgroup is constantly requesting it. It has never made it to my board game shelf because it is always in use. This is why this is the number 1 game of the year. A very clever, super fun game with a theme. I mean, it's very thematic too, but it's a theme that I never thought I'd be interested in. But this was my number 1 game of the year. It's so much fun. A game called Fromage, which came from Road to Infamy Games. This one has a 7.7 rating on Board Game Geek, and I think that's lowballing it because this is a fantastic game. I mean, I think Fromage should be at the top of anyone's board game list. Anyone who cares about Euro games, I think this is a very clever, super fun game. It combines worker placement and area control, sort of, where you're trying to place cheese in certain areas of different quadrants of this board. I've only put out half the board here so you can kind of see the mat that goes underneath. This keeps the game in place while you're playing, but allows the board to slide because these 4 quadrants have to rotate at the end of each turn. So you're placing your workers simultaneously in the quadrant that's facing you, and then the board turns around. The more powerful actions mean that you're not going to get your worker back very quickly. This guy here who's going to get 3 cattle isn't going to come back to me for another 3 turns. I'm not going to get him back again. You reclaim your worker when the board turns around and they're facing you again. So a very clever, simple way of managing the time and keeping track of how long your workers need to stay in place. You've got, I think, gorgeous artwork. It's kind of a pen and ink style. It's very European, this game. And as I said, it's a very fun Euro game too. The player boards are asymmetric, so your cattle are going to allow you to build different cheeses depending on which board you get. There's also, and I didn't talk about this a lot in the review that I did, but there's a stack of these structure cards. And what these allow you to do at the start of the game, you're going to shuffle these up, deal out 4 to each player, and then it's a pick and pass draft until you've placed 4 of these buildings at the top of your player board. So here they have some that are printed on there. You can play this as the simple, most balanced version of the game, or you can do that drafting, and each of these 4 buildings is going to be replaced by other ones. The buildings themselves are clever, and even the designs of these cards are really good because you've got some iconography on the front. But importantly, because there's so many of these things and they all do different things, there's a text or a rulebook explanation on the back that tells you what this is and why it's called the foundation, for example, or the fermenting chamber, or an aging room for cheese. Just such a great little game, and you can use that draft to build kind of an engine. My son played this at one point, and he had a little engine where he was getting orders and he was able to complete orders by placing things in certain ways. Just a nice, elegant game. It's maybe a bit of a point salad. You've got a scorecard at the end where you have to track all the victory points in each of the 4 quadrants, and victory points from your board, and victory points from completing orders. And I do like all of these orders. So you've got a stack of these cards with a nice little picture of cheese, the name of a cheese on here. Really what you're trying to do is, on this one, place an orange cheese on a bronze space. That's a not very aged cheese, so this one's easy to place and get that worker back again. But it has to be the orange cheese worker, the hard cheese worker here, who's got the orange cheese base. So an elegant game, very clever. You're going to get lots of points from completing these orders. The rules even came with a description of some of the cheeses in the game and a game pairing menu for which games go best with which cheeses. The board is modular and it's going to be random, which quadrant is beside which. Even the way that the centerpiece that's going to give you resources is laid out is modular and variable, because you can flip it over here. And these are inserts for these game boards that work with different player counts, and they're all double-sided too. So the layout of the board is super customizable, and it's modular, and it's going to be set up at random. Of course, the boards are going to be more crowded, smaller spaces, fewer spaces available when you're playing a two-player game compared to a four-player game. But we had fun playing this. I played it at 2, 3, and a four-player count. Always fun. 4 is very different from 2, just because there's so much competition and lots of people can be chasing after the same goals, which makes it quite competitive. But we had fun playing this at every single play count. So you have a modular board that's a lazy Susan. The lazy Susan is part of the play. It's very important for the rules because the turning of the board determines when you get your workers back, but also each quadrant plays very differently. It's super thematic as well. Your workers are cheese makers, and that's very clear. They're sitting on a piece of cheese. The different kinds of cheese are important. Certain workers are going to make certain kinds of cheese, so you need to have them available. It's just another resource that you're managing, and you're going to be placing these pieces of cheese on the board, and the workers fit right on top of those pieces. So the worker's going to come back, but the cheese is going to stay. Well, I put an orange worker on a blue space, but you get the gist here. This would have to be a blue worker who goes here. He's not going to come back to me for 3 turns. So it is thematic. The art is fun. The fruit, I mean, these are just, all the fruits do the same thing, but they have 3 different fruit meeples here in my copy. There's also 3 different kinds of cattle. You've got cows and goats and sheep, actually, in here, but they all do the same thing. They're just there for fun, to have different animals. It doesn't matter which one you take and put in your barn. Those things are all the same and they do the same thing, but it does make it a bit more fun. It makes it look better on the table when you've got all of these different cattle. You've got 3 different buildings, even. They're all different sizes for your structures that you're going to be building. These, again, it doesn't matter which ones you're choosing. It's just aesthetically, it's more fun, it's more pleasing, it's more enjoyable to have a variety of these different kinds of pieces on the table. The artwork is great. The components are fantastic. It's super replayable, with the advanced option of the draft at the beginning of the game to dictate what's going to be on your board, what structures you'll have access to. And it's got this great balance between the short-term gain of what you're doing on your turn and your long-term plan of, am I going to have the right worker available to do the thing that I want when that quadrant of the board turns around to my side? So there is a lot of thinking ahead, but you're still working on those short-term goals. Oh, I need 3 fruit this time because I'm not going to get any more fruit until the whole board comes around, and I know I need some fruited cheeses in order to get those spaces that I want. Very, very clever and strategically deep, but again, pretty simple to figure this one out. It feels, the new players, I just taught this game the other night. In fact, on Christmas Eve, we were playing it. Like I said, everybody's asking, can we play Fromage? Can we play Fromage? Oh, you have to try this Fromage. It's not me even who's kind of advertising that I have this thing. But my play group is like, let's teach new people, let's teach new people. And it was a little overwhelming on Christmas Eve to the new players. However, it only took like a turn or 2 before they realized, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing here. Oh, now I can start to think ahead a little bit more, because the rules themselves are easy to grasp. So, like I said, 7.7 on Board Game Geek, but that's definitely an underrating in my opinion. I think that this should be rated much higher than that. It's my #1 game of the year, and I've played a lot of games this year. This one has come out again and again, and everyone in my group is excited to play it again and again as well. So it's going to be, I think this will be a perennial one that keeps coming out and keeps coming out. It's not one that I play for the review week and then put away. Like I said, I don't even have a space on the shelf for it yet. And that the reason for that is that it keeps coming out. So it's always kind of ready to go to the table. It went in my bag on Christmas Eve when we went out to visit people so that we could play it. It's just that great combination that I love so much of rules that are simple to learn and teach, but strategic depth. And you've got so much going on here with the 4 quadrants and all the different ways that you can earn points. And you can choose what to focus on, and guaranteed you're going to finish a game. And then you're thinking, oh, if I played again, I would do this next time, which to me makes it so much fun. So much fun. So definitely my number one game of the year. It might be my number one of next year too. I mean, I like it so much. There is an expansion in the works that's going to hit Kickstarter, I think, in the coming months. An Italian expansion. So this one is set in France. The next one is Italian. It's going to be a standalone expansion too. So it can be played just on its own or combined with Fromage. So, man, what a fantastic game. And honestly, what a fantastic year for games. Fromage rounds out my top games of the year list. And what a year for games. I played so many games. There's so much variability, so many themes. And, you know, it's nice when a game has a theme with mechanics that fit. It does, in some ways, it makes it easier to learn or understand the game. It's a situation where what I've learned over the years since I started doing this channel is that you can make a great game with any theme. Obsession was one that I never thought I'd be the least bit interested in, kind of a Downton Abbey style game where you're having parties and planning events. But that's a super fun game with mechanics that are straightforward, and you see what you're doing and understand what you're doing in real life. I think Fromage is the same kind of thing. The mechanics make sense based on the theme and what you're doing in the game. But so much creativity in the board game space. I feel like we're in a golden age. And these are the best games I've played of the year. And you might disagree. You might have your own favorites. I'd love to hear about what are your top games of 2024 and what are you most looking forward to in 2025. You can leave a comment in the comment section below the video. You can also email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes go. Previous ones are already up there. Brains on Games is the X handle and the Facebook page and the Blue Sky feed and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.